It's like a sharknado, except with poop.
I'm not happy.
So no doubt Melvin Capital is in a lot of pain.
There will be carnage, I can guarantee you.
They're starting to have to unwind their longs in order to pay for the pain that they are seeing in these other short positions that are getting absolutely crushed.
It is a corrupt system.
A casino-like atmosphere.
But when they all come to get out of that movie theater because somebody yelled fire, that door is only so big.
Now it's almost become this risk that if you're publicly coming out as a hedge fund and disclosing the stocks that you're against as one trader, as one Twitter user put it, you're at risk of getting Melvined.
The reason the market is doing what it's doing is people are sitting at home, getting the checks from the government.
Grandma and the little guy have all banded together into a big group, and they've done this to the stocks.
It's just a way of attacking wealthy people.
The authorities, should they step in?
You know, you have these massive bailouts. You have the Federal Reserve pumping money into failing banks and corporations. And then, I don't know, how many segments did CNBC do to talk about how the market is manipulated by these very companies and banks?
This fair share is a bullshit concept.
Ban social networks to talk about buying short stocks.
There's a number of different ways that the stock market is manipulated or, artificially moved in one direction or another. I generally think that almost all of it is absolute BS.
It is a corrupt system. Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Hello, the nation, Waldorf Nation, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's Wednesday. We got a great show for you all today. We're going to talk about some different topics here. We've got Amazon stealing tips. Huh. I know. Amazon exploiting and stealing the fruits of people's labor. Who would have imagined, right? Who would have imagined? I have the details on that. And what they get from getting caught and what should happen, but won't. We're also going to talk about how, hey, guess what? We found voter fraud, potentially. Turns out, as it seems to go, that it's been done by Trump supporters, of course. Of course. We also have a Capitol rioter. To kind of compare and contrast the story that we had yesterday of the Capitol rioter that was asking for a trip to Mexico, we have another one that's actually denied bail. You're not going to be surprised why. Of course. And then, yeah, so we also have an incredibly heartbreaking story of medical inequalities between African Americans and regular and white people, regular white people. Who tend to get treated far better than the average black person when it comes to medical issues. So I'm going to talk about that. It's a terrible, heartbreaking, just a horrendous story. So I'm going to go and talk about that. Before we do, there's already a super chat here from Zach Sherman, who points out that, well, that's a really strange. That looks really strange here. Hopefully that's not all you're seeing. That's really weird. All right, anyway, must be having some strange issues here. But let me read that super chat as soon as I get done loading here. Violence against women is not tolerated. True. Pelosi put out a press release that they're going to strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee of seats, and Pelosi called McCarthy. So McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, just like which is not surprising at all, he decided not to do really anything about Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so now the Democrats are holding a vote here. And I mean, to strip her of committee assignments. Should she be on the education committee? No, she should not. And so I hope they do. And now, of course, the thing that's also happening as a result of that is, oh yeah, now we're going to go after Ilhan Omar. For what? What did she do? Did she try to foment rebellion? Does she believe in some crazy things? Well, if you ask the right-wingers, absolutely, but she does not. It's ridiculous, but all right, anyway, there's that. Let's get into the stories here. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Thank you for that very kind super chat message, Zach Sherman, much appreciated. Let's dive in. It's really weird because and on YouTube, in the preview, it looks like the screen is like super shrunk and my head's over in the corner. So that's what I was looking at. I was like, wait a minute. that's not how it's supposed to look. Weird. But anyway, let's get into it. Voter fraud. Conspiracists. Let me start that. I don't know. All right, looks fine. Good. It's just on my end, apparently, which is weird. Conspiracy theorist Lin Wood, who is also one of Donald Trump's, or was Donald Trump's lawyer, is now under investigation for, wait for it, voting illegally. Oh, the irony. Such good irony. All right, so details. Now, the Georgia Secretary of State's office is now investigating allegations that Wood, a high-profile Trump attorney who launched fruitless challenges to election results and pushed baseless conspiracies of voter fraud, may have illegally voted himself in the November general election. Because, of course. Shocker! This is my shock face. Oh, I'm sorry, a Trump supporter doing voter fraud? Huh? No. Oh my God. No way. All right. So now, this is, according to a report, that Wood had played a crucial role in former President Donald Trump's efforts to undermine the election, which of course is the irony. And this came from Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's office, who has confirmed the investigation was opened after a reporter from WSB-TV in Atlanta, in Georgia, had posted an email from Wood where he basically admitted that I don't live in Georgia. He said he had been, quote, domiciled in South Carolina for several months after purchasing property in the state back in April. State investigators now have to determine if Wood actually lived in South Carolina or in Georgia when he voted early and in person for the November general election. Oh, that is fantastic. That's great. Look, okay, so Lin Wood, if you're not familiar, Lin Wood, I'm sure you are, but he's crazy. This guy's crazy pants. He's going around talking about, insane conspiracy theories. He's a QAnon supporter, and he's like, Donald Trump, he had the election stolen from him, see, and it was QAnon, and it was Dominion voting systems, and it was all these things, and that's why Donald Trump's really president, and you got all this voter fraud that's happening. And by the way, I think I might have also actually done voter fraud. Oops. Sad. These he also, by the way, as a lawyer, had filed a bunch of hilarious lawsuits that were very, very sad and filled with typos. For example, he accidentally wrote one of his lawsuits was filed under, quote, plenty of perjury instead of penalty. Look, maybe that's a mistake, maybe that's a typo, or maybe he's being super honest and saying, I got plenty of perjury for you. I got tons of it, tons and tons of perjury, tremendous perjury, the best perjury. I don't know, but it is pretty funny. Look, he was also suspended and then banned off Twitter after posting support for the Capitol insurrection. Here's what he said: "The time has come, patriots. Time to fight for our freedom." That was hours before the failed insurrection by the president. The president and his supporters. The president, of course, egged them on, and you had a whole rally, Stop the Steal, which, by the way, Lin Wood has been at many, many Stop the Steal rallies as well in Georgia. And so, he's been part of this entire thing, egging people on, spreading conspiracies, telling people the election's stolen from you, and you got to fight, and you got time to take our country back, patriots. Well, all while saying it was the voter fraud and then doing the voter fraud. Yeah. So Wood also had posts deleted from Parler. Remember Parler? Parler no longer exists. It's no longer up. They can't find a web host for it. Even so, he had posts deleted from Parler that called for the killing of Mike Pence. And then frequently, of course, shared QAnon conspiracies. It's bad when your posts get deleted by Parler. They're like, ooh, no, this parlay is too hot for me. Nope. Let me get rid of that. Cover our ass there. I mean, look, here's the thing. I don't like Mike Pence. Not a fan.
Mike Pounds.
Okay. I don't like Republican politicians in general. Generally, right? I actually think the Republican Party itself as an apparatus is a cancer on the United States of America and society. The world would be better off if no one ever voted Republican ever again. That includes, by the way, Republican voters. They would also be better off, especially when it comes financially, as the data shows that the economy tends to do better when Republicans are not in power. Inequality is lower. The only people that do well under Republicans are the rich. Wages actually tend to rise for regular people under Democrats, and even the stunk market does better under Democrats. Because of course, we end up having a crash under Republicans because they deregulate the crap out of everything. Now, that said, I'm not saying Democrats are great. Democrats got problems. But it just seems like Republican policies are just demonstrably terrible for the country, for America, and the world in general, and only helps, again, the very, very few. All right? And so, that's it. All aside, my point is, though, even though Republican politicians are terrible, I don't want to see them harmed. I don't want to see them killed. I don't want to see them harmed in any shape or form. Do I want to see them yelled at? Yes. Do I want to see them get owned on Twitter? Absolutely. That's fun. But nobody gets hurt. I mean, yes, their fifis get hurt, and that's sad, and they cry. But I enjoy that. I enjoy Republican tears. But you lose me at physical violence. This is true. Unless, of course, it's to defend yourself, which is totally fine. And that's really the difference here, okay? The right wing tends to use violence and threats of violence and intimidation in order to keep people, mostly minorities, in line. That's what they do. And so, I'm not in favor of that. All right, but anyway, Wood responded to the allegations on Tuesday evening, writing this, quote, "I was domiciled in Atlanta in October of 2020 and was a resident of Georgia at the time. I've been a resident of Georgia since 1955. But wait, in the email you admitted that you had been actually domiciled in South Carolina. So, what is it? What is it? What is it? He also said, well, I own properties in both Georgia and South Carolina. I changed my residence to South Carolina on February 1st, 2021. So really it comes down to the timing, right? He also said on Telegram, quote, "I'm leaving Georgia and changing my residency to South Carolina after he said that Georgia had, quote, falsely accused and shunned me." He also wrote that Raffensperger was a, quote, loser and who is going to jail. You first, dude. You might be going first. Again, turns out voter fraud, voting illegally, kind of a crime in this country. Who knew? Who knew? Now, the investigation, of course, is going to find out what the truth actually is. And they're even looking into some of his posts on Telegram to figure out his intentions, basically. If he had planned to actually live in South Carolina before he cast his vote, which would run afoul of course, Georgia election law. Georgia state code says that if a person moves to another state with the intention of remaining there for an indefinite time and making such a state the person's place of residence, which ultimately Lin Wood did, then they are no longer considered to be eligible to vote in Georgia. So really it kind of goes down to, the timing here, right? So if he was living in South Carolina and was intending to stay in South Carolina during the election, but then since he was registered to vote in Georgia and not in South Carolina where he was living, so he goes in person to Georgia to vote in person even though he lived in South Carolina, that would be voter fraud, basically. And so they've got to prove that, right? Now, that might be a difficult case to prove, but they're talking about that anyway. Now, this also does say one big thing about him, in that maybe he doesn't know that much about election law. Given that he is a lawyer who has made voter fraud a central thing that he likes to talk about, you would think you would know this law. Maybe he's not that smart, though. Also, it does confirm that the system does work. So did he vote in both states? No, he did not. As far as I know, he voted in Georgia, even though he was living in South Carolina, which would, again, be considered voter fraud, at least under state law, Georgia state law. But again, it confirms how the system actually does work. You know that thing about rampant fraud, right? It turns out that's bullshit, because we end up having an actually pretty robust system. And we've had for a long time before Donald Trump, because I love how they come out and say, oh, well, you didn't find voter fraud this time. Even though we said you found tons of voter fraud, and that's why Joe Biden won. You actually didn't, because Donald Trump did such a great job. Okay, but wait a minute. So either the system does work and it's Donald Trump's fault, or he gets all the credit for it, or it actually doesn't work and then Donald Trump didn't do anything because of all the voter fraud. They got to get their story straight, okay? But as far as I know, we have a pretty robust system that catches voter fraud and prevents it from happening, from affecting elections. And so, okay, the only time that we seem to find voter fraud, too, is not from the people that they're accusing of voter fraud. It tends to be Trump voters. Who would have known? Oh, wait, all of us. Sidney Powell tournament, she needed the money. All right. Elizabeth on Facebook says, we don't want Lin Wood. In Georgia or South Carolina? I'm assuming South Carolina. Nobody wants Lin Wood, though. Nobody. Very sad. Moving on. Now, this is a story. You know how on January 6th, a bunch of angry Trump supporters, mostly upper middle class, business owners, CEOs, doctors, lawyers, right-wing live streamers, they went into the Capitol and they filmed themselves doing crime, breaking windows, breaking into people's office, threatening people, beating police officers. You know, that whole thing? Well, you know, those people, one thing that united them, along with their support of Donald Trump and stealing the election and their class, because this is not a working class movement. This was a rebellion, a revolt of the bourgeois, of the business class. Well, most of them were white, except, of course, for this guy, who, you know, was not, along with many of the others who were given bail. He was not. So let me give you some details here. According to reports, 20-year-old Emmanuel Jackson, participant in the violent Capitol riot early this month, is said to have been denied bail. Jackson, who is black, turned himself in to the Metropolitan Police Department in D.C. on January 18th, confirmed that he was seen in footage from the riot, per a New York Times report at the time, confessed to participating in the violence. Of course, there are pictures of him using a baseball bat to, you know, clash with Capitol Police, hitting riot shields and things like that. So, brother was deep in it. There's no doubt about that. According to this report, Jackson was seen using a baseball bat on police officers who were holding up shields. He now faces a total of 5 federal charges in connection with that riot. So that's what happened there. Jackson, who has a preliminary hearing set for next month, has not been given bond and will instead be held at a correctional treatment facility. So, okay. I wonder why. This was happening. Well, in a Washington Post D.C. report, D.C. area attorney Brandy Hardin noted that Jackson had been recently homeless and was living in a transitional housing program when he had turned himself into authorities. So he was actually not part of that upper crust. So he was one of the few people that were involved in this Capitol riot that were actually, you know, doing very poorly, not doing well. So not part of the other, you know, the generally the larger group of Trump supporters who are pretty affluent, right? So now, yesterday, I talked about I talked about one of these affluent people, Jenny Cutt. She is a pro-Trump CEO of Flower Shop that actually got a lot of money in GoFundMe, you know, donations from other Trump supporters for her defense. Now, this woman had asked a judge if she could travel out of the country to Mexico for a work-related trip. Now, so she's not spending time in jail. No, they're not holding her, and they're not they're not saying that she can't travel out of the country. Now, they haven't given her approval yet. There were some false stories going around saying that the judge had approved it already. So far, we don't necessarily know. But let me give you more details, okay? Now, attorneys for Cudd, who previously ran for Midland, had requested permission from a federal judge to take a work-related bonding retreat from February 18 to 21 with fellow employees and their spouses in a court motion filed on Monday. Prosecutors have already taken no position on Cudd's motion, according to USA Today, and they have yet to make a decision. Cudd is facing only 2 misdemeanor charges in January 6th Capitol siege, entering a restricted building, and disorderly conduct. She had posted a 25-minute Facebook video detailing her actions that day, of which, of course, she had done, you know, crime during that time. But she said, well, we decided to storm the Capitol after alleging that Vice President Mike Pence had betrayed her and other quote-unquote patriots. Cudd claimed that she and her others didn't actually vandalize anything, but that's not true, but acknowledged being part of a group that broke into the speaker's office. If convicted on both charges, Cudd reportedly faces up to 18 months in prison and a $100,000 fine. So this upper-class businesswoman breaks into Pelosi's office as an insurrectionist in order to help steal the election for Donald Trump in a group that was chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And, you know, she decides that she is going to, after getting caught for all this stuff, to ask the judge if she can go to Mexico for a retreat. Homeless brother, however, goes in, fights the cops, along with many insurrectionists, and gets locked away. No bail. Okay, so I'm not saying that this guy should go free. What he did was very serious and very problematic. Okay, let's be very, very clear about that. But here's the thing. I'm just saying that even among Trump supporters, if you were white and well-to-do, you're going to get organic food in jail, or you can make bail, and maybe even get charged with only a misdemeanor when you were doing probably worse. But if you're a black man, you're going to get worse. You're going to get the shit, even if you are on their side and you do everything that they want. You put your body in harm's way. You're never going to be equal to them. And that's the lesson, okay? You can't do what they do. That's the talk that I hear that black mothers have to give their sons. You can't do the things that they do. You're not going to get away with it the way that they can. You're going to get treated harsher. You're going to get treated worse because you are black. White people, however, people who look like me, put a MAGA hat on me, and you could easily have seen someone who looks exactly like me in that Capitol riot, in that Capitol siege, in that insurrection. And I could bail out, probably. I mean, people like me always come out ahead in our system. And you know what? Those Trump supporters, they like it that way. They prefer it that way. Me, I think they should both be denied bail. Treat them equally, right? They're both part of this Capitol insurrection. I mean, the gall, the temerity that she has to sit there and ask for an exemption. I should be able to go to Mexico for this nice trip. She held a, you know what? She tried to help a coup and is proud of her actions. It just shows, this entire thing shows how the rules are different when it comes to race and class, and of course is a great example of, once again, white right-wing privilege. All right. It's a non-related story here. So here's a pretty heartbreaking story. David Bell, 39-year-old father of three, recently died in his wife's arms on January 12th in a hospital parking lot in St. Peters, Missouri. So now this man had been turned away not once, not twice, but 3 times for chest pains and heart attack related symptoms. So this is according to a report from KMOV4. So now Bell, the director of Central County Fire and Rescue, had gone to Barnes Jewish Hospital for persistent chest pains twice on the week of January 8th, according to his family. So now look, chest pains, they can be as benign as indigestion or as fatal as a heart attack. And so when you get chest pains that are persistent, generally, the advice is seek medical care immediately. Do not F around with chest pain. And so that's what this man did. He's like, hey, all right, I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm going to get this checked out because I don't know, I could be having a heart attack. Now, both times, the family said, medical staff actually had refused to admit him and instead sent him home with ibuprofen. Just take some ibuprofen, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Ibuprofen for chest pain. So now that was, again, the first time. Later on, he goes and he does it again. Same thing. Same thing. Ibuprofen, we refuse to treat you. You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. So now that happened. And a couple days later, things didn't get better. In fact, his wife, Sadie, said she got a call from his coworkers on January 12th saying that in addition to chest pains, he had shortness of breath. So look, those two things together, those are heart attack signals. Those are tells. Certainly, you would think that that would be enough. If you go in there and say, I've had chest pains all week. I've got shortness of breath. Please do some tests. I think I might be having a heart attack. And well, you would think that would be enough to get this man some treatment, right? Or at least some tests, EEGs, X-rays. I'm going to admit something, okay? And this is part of privilege, right? And it's kind of embarrassing. So you guys, many of you might know that I have acid reflux, and it can get pretty severe. It can get pretty bad. Before I was diagnosed with GERD, I thought that I was at one point. I thought I was having a heart attack. I know. It was one of the worst episodes of heartburn I'd ever experienced. It lasted for hours, and so I thought, I'm dying. I'm gonna go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, immediately admitted, and I got all the tests. EEG, X-rays, no fuss. Everything was fine. It was great. Got right in. But this guy, he didn't get the same treatment. He got completely different treatment. So anyway, like I said, he's got chest pains, he's got shortness of breath, he's got heart attack symptoms. His coworkers did the right thing, brought him to the hospital, but wait, they had taken him to that same hospital once again. And once again, was given the same inconclusive diagnosis without any tests whatsoever. And once again, same thing. Third time, you gotta stop coming in here. Here's some ibuprofen. You'll be fine. Now, on this last occasion, he was walking back to his car with his wife and had doubled over in pain. Here's what the wife said. Quote, "We got halfway to the car and he said, 'Oh, Sadie.' And I said, 'Baby, what's wrong?' That's when he fell to the ground." That was his last words. A bystander had attempted to perform CPR on him, but at that point it was too late. It was just too late. Bell ended up dying in his wife's arms in the parking lot of the very hospital that denied him treatment. 39 years old. 39. Man had a good job. Had insurance. Wasn't any problem with that. Worked at the fire rescue. Helped save people's lives for a living. And yet, that wasn't enough. You know why? Because he was a black man in America. Black men in America, black people in America generally, do not get treated well. There is a bias, even in our medical system, where people who have symptoms are just written off. Oh, you'll be fine. You're overreacting, or you don't feel pain like we do. Let me give you a study. It was back in 2016, and this found that nearly half of first and second year medical students, nearly half, amazing stat, believe that black people had thicker skin than white people and perceived them as experiencing less pain than white people. That was 2016. That's insane. You're going to tell me that there are people who are otherwise well educated that believe in this. And where does this come from, by the way? The origins will shock you. Okay? This came from an idea from 19th century experiments that were conducted by a physician named Thomas Hamilton. So now, Thomas Hamilton was a real piece of shit. He actually was a wealthy plantation owner who regularly tortured and enslaved a black man named John Brown. he created blisters all over Brown's body in an effort to prove that black skin went deeper than white skin. This is what, and we still have medical training today that echoes this. That's horrifying. There's more. A 2019 study published in the American Journal of Emergency Medicine analyzed data from 14 previously published studies on pain management and found that black patients were 40% less likely to receive medication for acute pain compared to white patients, and 34% less likely to be prescribed opioids. Gee, I wonder why that exists. I wonder why that disparity, why they won't be prescribed. Could it have anything to do with stereotypes of black people being, addicted to drugs? So understand, this is just a couple of examples of the medical field being biased against people of color. And for black women, by the way, black women have it far, far worse. But yet they looked at the situation and they said, you're fine. You don't need any tests. Take ibuprofen. Come back later. Be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. And wouldn't you think that maybe the second time this person comes around and says, I still have awful chest pain. Please help me. That they might actually think, okay, maybe we should do something. It's our job. We'll do some tests. But again, they didn't. And this man is dead, but he didn't need to be. Had they done the testing, they probably would have realized that maybe something was going on medically and possibly saved his life. It's been so incredibly shameful that this situation even happened. So now the hospital itself released a statement, an email to Business Insider from BJC Healthcare, which runs Barnes Jewish, and says, our thoughts are with the family after this loss, as well as with the entire Central County Fire and Rescue team. But we cannot comment on individual patient cases due to patient privacy laws. So basically, we're real sorry this happened, but we take no responsibility for this. And we can't say anything because we get HIPAA. Sorry. Can't do anything, can't say anything. It's a disgusting, what a cop-out. Absolute cop-out. Enraging. So now for the family, his wife Sadie told the news outlet that she believes her husband did not receive the treatment that he deserved because the doctors and medical staff did not take his concerns seriously. And again, that situation happens with black people and especially with black women. So here's what she said. I don't want any family to feel what we're feeling right now. So this is why, it's a great example of why we need to realize that our society is not equal. That racism and bias absolutely do exist in so many different layers of our society. This is institutional. It's institutional racism. There is implicit bias. There is stereotyping that bleeds into everything. And of course, it happens in other places, some places more than others. It's taught. There are biases, and it bleeds into everything. It really does. Jobs, healthcare, buying a home, everything. Everything. And we need to find a way to get rid of that, to get rid of those biases so that we can save lives and give everybody a fair shot and a fair treatment under the law. So now, one more thing here to add, okay? His wife put together a GoFundMe to pay for his funeral expenses, okay? I'm gonna put the link in the description of this video. And I wanna ask everybody to please help out if you can. I know things are very difficult here. I know that, some people, a lot of people are still suffering from under COVID and don't have the money. That's totally fine. But you should definitely help us out if you can. $5 or so, and help this family. I mean, look, we can't take back this loss, but at least we can help in some small measure this family that lost their family member way too soon. Okay. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna take a break. Real heavy story here. We're gonna come back and talk about how Amazon is stealing tips from their workers. So, all right, stay right here. We'll be back in a minute. Around the Nation.
For just $67.
There's some whores in this house.
Amazing. Why, you're getting nervous, man.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here, Waldorf Nation. If you probably didn't notice that I put the link in the chat here for that GoFundMe, that fundraiser. So help them out. All right. A real sad, heavy story. So you know we're kind of on like a downer note today. So let me let me continue with the downing because there's no upper here. Okay, disaster. All right. So before we get into it, let's see. I'm gonna read some super chats. LL says Republicans, the real treasure was the voter fraud we committed along the way. Ah, yes. Excellent comment. Bruce Barons, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Search Tech, Fox News, they say night primetime shows Carlson and Ingram are standing up for what is right. Can you hear the dog whistle? It's a human whistle, actually. So there's that. All right. Let's move on. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's go over to Twitch. Let's see. Adrian Lieb, thank you so much for that gifted tier 1 sub. Much appreciated. Also, thank you for subscribing for 4 months with Prime. That's awesome. Super awesome. All right. Now let's do it. Let's go to the next story. Amazon has just come to a settlement in charges that it had stolen tips from its delivery drivers. So now, the Federal Trade Commission announced on Tuesday that Amazon will be required to pay $61.7 million in settlement charges that it withheld some customer tips from its Amazon Flex drivers over a 2.5-year period. So now, according to the complaint against Amazon and its subsidiary, Amazon Logistics, the company had advertised that it was going to pay 100% of the tips to its drivers. So, hey, we're going to give you 100% tips. So come be an Amazon driver because business is booming. We need the drivers, and we're going to pay you really well and it's going to be great. But in reality, of course, it wasn't. They ended up actually using customer tips to settle the difference after it lowered the hourly rate. I'm going to explain how that worked, but basically they did this and they didn't tell anybody about it. So they're just like, ha ha ha, we're going to steal your tips and we're going to lower the rate that we pay you and just make up the difference with tips. And they thought that nobody was going to notice this. Well, people noticed. So that's super dirty. Now, the FTC also alleges that Amazon did not stop this behavior until they got caught. So the FTC began the investigation in 2019. That's when they found out about it, and they're like, "Oh no! I can't believe we got our hands caught in the cookie jar. We're gonna have to fix that. We're gonna have to change that. Oops." So now the complaint specifically has to do with the Flex services I mentioned that launched in 2015, which allowed anybody to sign up to deliver Amazon packages to customers. So it's part of the gig economy, basically. Now, the Flex drivers were paid an hourly rate for those deliveries, but could also receive customer tips. In the frequently asked questions section of the Amazon Flex app, the company had promised drivers to receive 100% of their tips, saying, for Prime Now, Amazon Fresh, and store deliveries, the customer can choose to tip. You will receive 100% of the tips you earn while delivering with Amazon Flex. An earlier version of this document also stated that Amazon will pass to you 100% of the tips that you earn back in May of 2018. We again know that that is a complete fabrication. It's a lie. In fact, Amazon also promoted the tip benefits in ads recruiting drivers, where the company offered a rate of up to $18 to $25 an hour and the ability to make more via tips. And when the driver signed up for the Flex service, its terms also promised 100% of tips, according to the FEC complaint. So they spelled it out very, very clear. You're going to get 100% of your tips. 100% going to you, and we're also going to pay you $18 to $25 an hour. That sounds great, right? That's the pitch. Well, that wasn't the case. TechCrunch explains that despite the language being used when Flex drivers use the app to accept their delivery gigs, they would actually be assigned delivery blocks, only some of which were tips eligible. So the places that you might not get a block assigned to you that even allowed tips. So that already cuts that down significantly. But also, initially this included Prime Now, but it later expanded to include Amazon Fresh and restaurants. Those that weren't eligible for tips were paid a flat rate. Meanwhile, customers using the Amazon app were encouraged to tip drivers anyway through the app, which noted that cash is not accepted upon delivery. So another thing that they used, that they did, was in 2016 changing their drivers' wages from $18 an hour plus tips to what they called a variable base pay, which ran over the course of 2.5 years. During this time, Amazon would reduce its own contribution to drivers' pay to an algorithmically set internal base rate using data it collected about average tips in the area. This base rate was actually well off and below the $18 to $25 advertised rate. Then instead of paying out 100% of the tips to the drivers, Amazon treated the bottom of the range as a guaranteed minimum and used drivers' tips to meet that minimum. So now understand that this was not a mistake. This is not like, oops, we oopsied. No, this was 100% planned. Like, yeah, of course we're going to screw our drivers over. What do you think we are? We're Amazon, bitch. Of course we can do it. We're incredibly powerful. We can get away with it. And until the FTC found out, they did get away with it. In fact, TechCrunch goes on to explain that when Amazon made these changes, it did not ask for drivers' consent or otherwise inform them at all. It also had internal discussions where the company tried to decide what level of detail about earnings to actually show to the drivers, knowing that the changes would reduce their earnings. And when drivers eventually figured out that they were being robbed, the company continued to say that it paid 100% of tips, even as it internally acknowledged that the situation had represented a huge PR risk to Amazon and described it as a, quote, reputation tinderbox. Oh, you think? Oh, you think this could have been problematic? No, really? You're literally robbing these drivers of everything, like of all their tips, or at least a large majority of them. So now here's the thing. I kind of disagree with the whole idea of tipping in general, even though I do it. I would say I'm a fairly generous tipper because I know that these people survive on that. I mean, I don't believe, though, that the onus should ultimately be on the customers to subsidize what the company should be paying you for your wage, right? And so I understand that some tip workers, too, can make a lot of money. But in general, you are forcing the customer to pay a wage that the employer should have actually been paying the whole time. And here's the other thing, right? It's not as if Amazon couldn't afford to pay out that wage, a high wage, $18 to $25 an hour. They just couldn't. There's no reason they couldn't. Amazon is worth billions of dollars. Billions. It's one of the wealthiest companies on the planet. And now, of course, we see why. It's because they extract the profit from their workers. They steal the fruits of their labor. These tips, again, were not for the company. They were for the driver itself, themselves, not to subsidize Amazon's profit margins. And the fact that they lied about this and they knew exactly what they were doing is incredibly disgusting. And we know this. We know this. Now, following the FTC issuing a civil investigative demand at Amazon on May 23rd, 2019, and after much deliberation, as I mentioned, they did change the practice. On August 22nd, 2019, Amazon announced an updated earnings experience to drivers, which was similar to the original compensation. So they had to go and admit, oops, it turns out that entire time we were kind of screwing you and stealing your money. But hey, you know what? We have updated our terms. So now everything is fine. Everything is fine. What are you talking about? It's all good. We're good. We're good. Okay, anyway. So now, the FTC settlement includes a $61.7 million fine, which is full amount of money withheld from drivers. This will be used to compensate the drivers. In addition to the fine, the settlement also prohibits Amazon from making further changes to how drivers' tips are used as compensation without first obtaining their express informed consent. Didn't DoorDash also have a tip problem? DoorDash, what was it? There were others too that have gone through this. Instacart, I believe, shipped. There are all these, gig economy type of delivery services that promise to give people tips, but then end up stealing their wages. And so, yeah, this is not a new thing. So now, here's the thing. That $61.7 million fine, that's nothing. That's basically restitution for the drivers. That's the amount of money that they stole, basically. All they had to do from the FTC is just say, okay, we'll give back the money you stole. And then next time when you try to steal from your employees, you at least got to tell them, oh, great. That's funny. But the amount that they had to give back is barely anything for Amazon. The company in the third quarter pulled in $96.15 billion in revenue and has stock earnings of around $12.37 per share. Amazon's doing just fine. You think they're affected at all by paying $61.7 million? No, of course not. And it's also said that revenue would climb to $112 to $120 billion in Q4, or an annual growth of 28 to 38%. Amazon is growing. It's getting bigger. It's getting richer. And a lot of that, of course, has been driven by the pandemic. A lot of people are not going out and buying things. They're ordering things off Amazon. And it's a lot of these other companies as well that were also hit by this. Again, Instacart, DoorDash, Ship, all these different companies who are doing really well as a result of the pandemic have been screwing over their workers and have been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. And so, look, as far as Amazon's concerned, I think they're too big. When your fine is so small that it barely even affects the company whatsoever, that's a problem. And so our regulators, first of all, they can't really punish them all that well, right? The fines in things like this are so infinitesimally small compared to how rich these companies are. And then, of course, when you try to push harder on those, they say, whoa, 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 whoa. Amazon creates so many jobs. We can't possibly ruin them because, if we put them out of business, if we punish them too hard, well, they're going to lay people off and it's going to ruin the jobs. And, well, there's a solution to that. It's called antitrust. Break them up. Amazon is too big. A lot of these companies have gotten too big. And so right now, they're too big to fail. They're too big to punish. These fines do absolutely nothing to them. They don't discourage these practices whatsoever. So what happens is it's basically useless. It's a cost of doing business for them. And they've already got money set aside to handle all that. And so what they need is to be broken up. I'm talking antitrust. Break them up. And then any division that does anything like this, a newly created company that used to be part of Amazon that would continue or do these practices, you need to sue them into oblivion. You need to make an example of some of these companies. Now, of course, that's not going to happen because our politicians fawn all over at the feet of Amazon and Jeff Bezos, who, by the way, had stepped down as CEO, but it doesn't really matter. One of the richest men in America, and that company culture, that corporate culture at the top, it's not going to go away just because Bezos isn't there. Someone else who does the same thing is going to fill that spot. So really, it doesn't really matter. And he and every other billionaire, I'm sorry, you don't get to be a billionaire in any other way other than through exploiting the workers in the system, crushing unions, stealing tips, stealing pay, even avoiding taxes, and on and on and on. The system is rigged. It's rigged in favor of them and rigged against you. Because even though the settlement, it's something, sure, they get their wages back, and that's fine. It's still not nearly enough to stop them from doing something else, even through even more sneakier practices. And that is overall the problem is systemic. And so fines and fees like this not going to really do anything to fix the system. We've got to use the tools that we have available to us, antitrust, in order to fix these companies. All right. That's all I got for you guys today. That's all the time I have. Let's see if there's any more super chats here. ATN, the soundboard. He's getting charged for something for funding the insurrection. I'm working on it. Dango Bango says Archer wants his royalties for that segment title. Wait, what? Oh, just a tip. Phrasing. Okay, anyway. I know, ridiculous. Thank you all for the very, very kind donations, by the way. And thank you for watching. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very helpful if you do so. Sign up to become a patron, patreon.com/Waldorf, Jeff Waldorf. And, you know, all that wonderful stuff. Can I say ooh-woo before you leave? Ooh-woo? I think I said it. I said it. So weird. Y'all. All right. Thank you all. Love you guys and gals. And we will see you all tomorrow. Remember, change begins with you. Good night, Nation.
Wet ass P-word.
Goodbye, Lynn.
Masturbate all day long.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
There's some whores in this house.
I like my new type.
Please clap.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.